Hi everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be showing you how to install Proxmox and how to set up Hackintosh the new way, which involves using Proxmox. So you can see I've got my server rack right next to me, and first of all I'm going to go through the requirements on how we can get this set up. Now, in comparison to using the traditional way, which is using OpenCore and bare metal hardware, we're going the Proxmox route, which uses virtualization, which Proxmox itself is a Type 1 hypervisor, so it's as close to bare metal as you can get. As well as this, you have GPU Passthrough, which exposes the physical components to the virtual machine, so you have very little overhead in performance. So what I'm going to do is, at the minute, my server only has the 6500 XT in it, which isn't supported with macOS. So I'm going to upgrade, or sort of downgrade you could say, to the RX 570, which will then let us GPU pass through and get graphics acceleration in macOS. So I'm going to do that now. If you're curious on whether your GPU is compatible, please visit the link in the description where you can see the full supported GPUs, the NVIDIA GPUs that are still supported, the AMD GPUs, and also the native GPUs that require no additional configuration. So let's upgrade it now. So here we have it. Obviously I know that one of the fans are broken on this graphics card, but it doesn't matter for my use case because I'm not going to be using it for editing or anything like that, because I'm going to be using my MacBook Air for that. So it's just going to be to basically display an image on the screen that's accelerated and can watch YouTube. So what I'm going to do is open up the rack mount case, which basically has a second generation, so the 2700X AMD Ryzen, 100 gigs of RAM, and obviously the 6500 XT is here, but we're going to be taking that out today. It's relatively straightforward to upgrade, so I'm going to get that done now. So you can see it's in the system now, so all I'm going to do is switch on the system, let it boot up, and then I'll get back to you shortly. So the first step really is installing Proxmox. So it's relatively straightforward, to be honest, to install Proxmox. You just need to go over to Balena Etcher, which is what we're going to use to write our ISO image to our USB. So if we go to download Etcher, I'm on macOS and I'm using my ARM chip, my Apple Silicon chip. So I'll download that version. So if I get that downloaded, we can see it's now starting to download. All I'm going to do is just wait a moment until it's all downloaded, and then we're going to run that executable, which should then allow us to write our ISO image to our USB device. Whilst we're waiting to do that, you can download Proxmox using the link in the description. So if we go to downloads and go to 9.1 ISO installer, which is the latest version, click on download, the same applies. Just wait for that to download, and then I'll be back shortly once we're all downloaded and we can go to writing the image to our USB stick. So all I need to do now is boot up my PC and hold the option for the BIOS. For me it's delete on ASRock boards. If you're unsure on the BIOS key for your system, literally just type in, for example, Asus B450F Gaming BIOS key on the internet and you'll be able to enter the BIOS. So obviously once you've held the key, you should be able to see the window just like on screen now, and you should be able to go to the advanced section. You're basically looking for CPU configuration in your BIOS. It may look a little bit different on Intel systems, but you're just looking for the virtualization technology. Again, everything that I feature in this video is going to be in the blog post for GPU Passthrough as well, so we may just want to refer back to it later. As long as we've got SVM mode enabled or Intel VTD, we're fine to proceed with installing Proxmox. So we're going to go to boot override and boot from our USB, and then we'll be greeted with the screen like this. So what I recommend is doing the terminal UI just for now, because it's so much easier than dragging a mouse around the screen. So once we do that, you'll see a few bits of code go down the screen, but basically we're loading up the terminal installer for Proxmox. So instead of keeping you waiting, we'll see when this loads up, we'll see the correct menu that we're meant to be seeing. So this should be the correct screen that you should be seeing. It's the EULA. Obviously read through this. I've read it already, so I'm going to press agree. And then you're going to choose which drive you want to install it to. So I'm going to install it onto my solid state drive, SDA. Again, be careful of what you're installing it to, because if you install it to the wrong operating system drive, then you could wipe out Windows or Linux or whatever else you have installed. So make sure it's the correct one. I know that this is the correct one, so I'm going to press enter and next. And select your country, so I'm in the United Kingdom, so I'll scroll all the way to the bottom. Again, it's in alphabetical order, so depending on where you are, depends on how far you have to scroll down. So we'll go to United Kingdom, and then just ensuring that my keyboard layout's United Kingdom as well, like so. Pressing next. Now this bit is where you set a password, so I've just set one there. And then set up an alerts email address if you want to as well. So any backup failures you should receive to that email, which you can set up at a later date. Next, and this is the important part, so making sure that we set this up correctly. So the management interface is basically an IP address that gets assigned that allows you to manage your Proxmox remotely from another device on your network. Now, it also serves as the VM network as well, just because obviously if you only have one NIC, then you'll serve the VM network and the management network over one NIC. However, I've got two. I'm just going to keep it on NIC 0 for now, because the reason I have two NICs is for link aggregation, which I'm going to set up in the background, so it's nothing to worry about. Set yourself up a host name, so this can be whatever you want. So I'm just going to call it Zadler vmh01.infrastructure.local, like so. Set an IP address that is on your network range. So for me it's 172.16.4, that's my network range, with 253 addresses, so the 24 scope, and just set a IP address that's free on your network. If you're unsure what IP addresses are free on your network, then just ping an IP address and see if it returns. That's usually how I test it. Your gateway address, again, depending on your network, depends on your gateway address. Please don't copy mine, because the chances are, unless you're really lucky, it won't be the same as mine. For DNS server, I just recommend setting it to Google. However, if you have any specific requirements, then you can set it to something else. Once we've done that, press on next, and it'll give us a summary of what we've just put in. Untick automatically reboot, so then we know when it's finished before rebooting, and then just press install. So we'll wait for this to install, and I'll be back with you when we get the installation complete screen. So just like that, we've got installation finished, reboot now. So that's a good sign. I'm just going to press enter because we want to reboot and get booted into Proxmox. So please obviously remove the USB drive as it says, and we'll be ready to obviously boot into Proxmox from the actual hard disk we've installed to. So we should be rebooting now, and we'll see if we can get a boot off our hard disk. So I've unplugged the USB drive. So we'll see if we get a boot. So I'm getting a boot option restoration. I think that's something to do with the ASRock boards specifically. You may not get that. Basically in the background what the BIOS is doing is reorganizing the boot options. So once this is done, I'm assuming we should get booted into Proxmox. So let's have a look now. So if we take a look, you can see Proxmox VE, and it's obviously the grub bootloader, and it's obviously booting up. So we'll wait and see if we can get an IP address, etc., and we'll then navigate to the Proxmox web interface. So this is the message you should be seeing if you've done everything correctly so far. So you can see it's asking us to go to the following web page. So let's do that now. So after navigating to the following IP address and port, I can then see a connection is not private obviously page. We're going to skip past that as we're obviously on a local connection, so that doesn't really matter for now. It's essentially because it's using a self-signed certificate. If you've done everything correctly, you should then get the Proxmox VE logins page. The username is root, and the password will be the one that you set during installation, and press login. You'll get a not valid subscription notification. This is because we're using the non-enterprise version of Proxmox, as of course we're using it in our home lab in my case, but obviously if you're using the enterprise version of Proxmox, you'd license it accordingly. So we're just going to ignore this message for now. Then if we select our node on the left hand side and press summary, you can see we have Proxmox virtual environment. So if you made it this far, this means you're then ready to configure Proxmox and ultimately get your macOS VM up and running. So let's get on to the next part of the video on getting macOS up and running on Proxmox and ultimately passing through our GPU to get full GPU acceleration within Proxmox. Let's get on to that now. So let's get into configuration. So you can see I have made some changes because it's actually the day later. I've imported all my old VMs because they're actually critical to the house, so Home Assistant and stuff like that. So I've had to do that in the background, but essentially if you imagine this is a clean slate just like yours would be right now, obviously bear in mind that I have got some extra VMs running and a few things connected that maybe you don't have, such as the SMB shares, so you can see my backups and my ISO shares, as well as my NFS storage for my VMs as well over the 2 gig connection. And all I've done extra as well under network is set up the bond between the 2 NICs. So apart from that, yours will be the exact same and you'll still have VMBR 0, etc. It'll just won't be a bond unless you've already done that in the background. So the first step is to go to repositories under updates. So that's after you've clicked on the node. And then we're going to disable the ones that say enterprise because we're not going to be running enterprise subscription today, obviously because I'm at home. But if we click on add and then continue or OK and add the no subscription repository, that's basically for home lab users and I guess small businesses really. And it's recommended for testing and non-production use, but it's more for sort of if you're running an enterprise environment in a data center, you're obviously going to want the enterprise support and obviously the enterprise tested repositories. But for us, no subscription's fine. So we're going to add that. And then you always get this warning message. Ignore it. Honestly, it's absolutely fine. Then if we go to updates and select refresh and then OK again, what it'll do, it'll pull a fresh apt get update. And then we can simply, first of all, I'd say, just upgrade and then press Y and let that upgrade. So that'll obviously get us to the latest version of all packages just before starting to make sure that we've not got any discrepancies in there. So I'll leave that to run because it is about 1 gig in size and then I'll be back once that's done. So you can see our updates are complete. So because there's been a kernel update, it is requesting us to reboot. I'm just going to skip that for now because the sort of prerequisites that we're doing now, so sort of getting GPU Passthrough ready, means that we won't really need to reboot until then. So it just avoids sort of a reboot later on down the line. So what I'm going to do is just X off this window and we'll reboot later. It doesn't matter at all. So we've done that. So we should then have no updates, as you can see. So essentially the next step is purchasing a template. So by using the link in the description below, you can see here is our Hackintosh page on the HSVE website. So it gives you a brief overview of what it is, an interactive demo as well. So if you want to try the HSVE script without actually buying it, then you can. So obviously you won't get the functionality of sort of like actually using Windows or whatever. It's just showing you essentially the idea behind it. So the script itself is £8 for 6 months access, down from £9.99. So I made that decision when we had a restructure at HSVE. Obviously onboarding support base for our sort of third-party support, just because I feel obviously in a home environment you're not going to be wanting to spend quite a bit of money on a script that you may only use once. So obviously you get 6 months of access for £8, and then it's really easy to renew after that. So simply once you've bought that, you will get an email with the license key, and you'll also be able to sign up for an account as well. So I'm going to log into my YouTube account now, and then essentially I'll show you how we can do it from your point of view. So let me do that now. So I've logged in at the top right to my account. Obviously I've only got this script for 2 days because obviously it's the demo license, and also obviously the people behind that want the script for free obviously won't be able to get that by the time the video is published. So on our main account page, you'll see everything to do with your account really, how many orders, your active licenses, and anything to do sort of with support, etc. Analytics, so you can view how many times your script's been used, if it's revoked, etc. So all we're going to do is copy this where it says install. So that'll copy the installation script. If we then go to the shell in Proxmox and paste this in there and press enter, we should then get prompted for the license key, which we'll provide by copying it and pasting it in. You'll then get a menu like this. So it'll essentially walk you through step by step what to do. So obviously we're going to do the top 2 steps first. So I'm going to configure the CPU for GPU Passthrough. So if we press option 1 and we choose what CPU we've got. So I'm running AMD, but obviously if you're running Intel, then you'll press Intel. So AMD, and then it's then setting things up for an AMD CPU. So you may get stuff going down the screen, and once that's done, you get sprung back to the main page. Now, after this first step, I do recommend that we now reboot. So I'm going to go and do that now. I need to shut all the virtual machines down. We'll reboot the host, and then I'll be back with you once obviously everything's started back up again. And then we can go to step 2, then step number 3, and then we'll finally skip all the way to step number 7. So just give me a moment and let me reboot the system. So I've rebooted the system now, so you can see we're back on the shell again. So next is to rerun the script again. I'll just grab my license key because we're going to run step 2. So step number 2, and it's simply going to obviously configure the GPU now for pass-through. Now there is sort of a manual step that we unfortunately cannot automate with the script, but I'll go through this with you. It's relatively straightforward and there's not really much you can mess up. So once it's done this step, it shouldn't take too long at all. Once it's done this step, we'll get onto obviously installing sort of the GPU blacklisting. So what that means is blacklisting the GPU means that Proxmox then won't see the GPU. So in a way, then that becomes available to just the VM and not Proxmox. So Proxmox is obviously the operating system, you could call it, below the VMs that we're running. So that means that if we blacklist the GPU, that only the VMs can see it. So that means that we can pass it straight through to the virtual machine. You can see that step's done now, so what I'm going to do is I'll get the relevant documentation. Again, you will have this in the description below, so it's really easy for you to follow along. It's probably better to keep this open, the video you're watching, grab up the post that I've linked below, and also obviously having your Proxmox. So give me a moment whilst I prepare that post for you now, and then I'll be back with the relevant instructions. So you can see the step here, blacklisting your devices. So we're going to copy this command, which basically what this will do, it'll list all GPUs and the IDs behind them. We just exit my script. Now the device, we're going to change this to VGA, because obviously it's a video graphics adapter. You can then see my Radeon RX 570, and all we're looking for is the ID, which is this little thing here. We're going to copy that and keep it safe, so just put it in a text editor. I'm using Sublime. You won't be able to see this, but essentially I'm copying it into a new text document, and then once we've got that, I will then copy the command, which is this one, into Proxmox, which will then give us a blank page. So this is where we're going to input this next command. Now this next command, obviously in your text editor, we're going to have to edit it a little bit, which we'll go through now. So in your text editor, what we're going to do basically is copy this ID again and then paste it in place. So if you've got multiple GPUs, you're literally doing a comma between them, but I've just got one, so I'm going to delete it all and paste that in there, just like so. Once we've got that, copy that, and then we're going to go straight back over to Proxmox, because obviously once we've copied that into the page here and done Control X, Y and Enter, that's GPU Passthrough ready to rock. The next part is restoring the VM, so we'll get onto that now. So now it's time to run the script again. So if we do that, obviously copying our license key from the portal, and then we're going to run option 3. Now there is an option which I'm going to do to run option 8. So option 8 allows you to change the download location. Because I've got SMB storage attached for ISOs, I'm going to do that, because then that means I don't have to store the ISOs or the backup files on the local disk. So depending on your disk size, it might be beneficial for you to do this. So it's asking on option 8 which storage I want to download to. So for me it's ISOs, so I'll type that in, press enter, and that's done. So then it'll take us back to the menu and we're ready to continue. Obviously if you do not have any additional storage, just leave it, because it'll download to the right place anyway. So if we run option 3, we'll then get the option all the way from Monterey to the latest version. So I'm going to do option 8 of course, which is macOS Tahoe. So we're going to leave this to download in the background because it might take a little while, and then I'll be back once it's downloaded, which will then be excitedly ready to restore the template. So that's now downloaded and we're on the next screen. Now there is an option where we can run option 7, but I'm not going to do that because I do prefer obviously restoring it in the web UI. So I'm going to go to ISOs, but you may go to local, which is obviously here. You'll go to your directory, go to backups, and then at the top you'll see HSV Tahoe. Obviously because the VM template isn't uploaded yet to the server, I'm just going to run the version that will basically be published, that's just called something a little bit different. Now if I select the VM template and select restore, this is where we choose our storage, so where this is going to be stored. So I'm going to store it on LVM thin, local LVM, which is basically the default storage medium in Proxmox, so you've probably got the same option, but there is options to store it on other volumes as well. Once we've done that, you can give it an ID. So I'm just going to do it as 9000. You can leave it as default. Give it a name. So HMac. How much memory? Do 16 gigabytes. Obviously 8 at a minimum, I'd say, for Tahoe. And select restore. So once we select restore, it'll then restore the template, which again can take some time. Obviously sit back and relax, grab a drink, and just wait for it. It'll take no longer than 3 minutes, I'd say, unless your system is quite slow. So let's wait for it to restore, and then we'll be ready to boot it up and set it up. So you can see the VM's now restored. So it's at the top of our list, and you can see macOS Tahoe. Obviously the notes section. Now this is quite an important bit. So essentially, if you expand the notes section, it's basically telling you right here, before booting the VM, you may need to replace the arguments. So if you've got a 12th to 14th gen CPU, you might need to copy this and paste it in the configuration file. Or if you're like me and you have an AMD CPU, you need to copy these arguments. So on the AMD CPU, if you do copy, go back to the shell and do the following: nano /etc/pve/qemu server /9000, and then scroll all the way down until you see the args file. Comment that out and paste the new ones underneath it. Once you've done that, Control X, Y and Enter, and then you can do one of two things. So you can either set up the VM without graphics acceleration, then pass your GPU through, or you can set it up with graphics acceleration if you've got a spare monitor and keyboard and mouse. So I'm going to do that just to see if I can give it a go. So you can see this is the physical display on the host. Now after we've blacklisted the GPU, we do need to reboot the system again, otherwise this won't work. So I'm going to shut down all my VMs, I'm going to reboot the system. Once I've done that, I'll be back with you and I'll show you how we can pass through the GPU and also the USB devices, obviously like the USB keyboard and mouse. So bear with me one moment whilst I get this rebooted. So I've rebooted the host, you can see, if I go back to shell, we're fully rebooted, but you might notice something different. So on your display, rather than it showing the welcome to Proxmox screen, showing the IP address of the host, you're now stuck on loading initial RAM disk. Now, even though Proxmox is loaded, it sticks on this screen because once it's loaded the initial RAM disk, that's when the GPU then doesn't get managed by Proxmox. Hence why the screen stays literally frozen in place. So now we're ready to pass through the GPU. Before that, all I wanted to make you aware is in the pass-through guide linked below, you may need to change some settings in your BIOS. So please check that everything's set in your BIOS just like this list on here. If it isn't, then it probably won't allow GPU pass-through. If you're unsure on how to find a setting, please submit a help desk ticket and we'll be more than happy to try and help you. Once you've got all of that under wraps, we're going to go to the VM itself, head over to hardware, add PCI device, we're going to go to raw device and select our video card. Now there will be an audio device, however you do not need to pass through the audio device, just the GPU, as that tags along with it. You can see the same address, just a .1 next to it. So the root device will carry along everything in its place. We're going to tick all functions, ROM bar, PCI Express and primary GPU. If we then select add, you can see that's in the list here. If we go back to add again, we're going to go to USB device, use USB port and then pass through your USB devices. So you can see it's seeing our USB, it's seeing my UPS, but I'm passing through the composite KVM device, which is PyKVM's sort of HID device. Once I've done that, you can leave USB 3 enabled, even if it's a USB 2 port, so that doesn't matter at all. If I select add, you can see we've got the two devices that we've just added. The next step is going to display and selecting none, even though we have got a graphics card. This basically, the graphic card, as it says, of Proxmox is going to be none because Proxmox isn't serving the graphics anymore. It'll be our GPU. If we select OK, head over to console, even though the console won't work, and select start now. This will then begin to boot up macOS Tahoe. On the screen you can see we've got a no signal and you can see the Proxmox logo loading up. This is a positive sign to see. It may take a few times to obviously boot, but you can see then we've got a menu. So we've got the HSVE OpenCore custom bootloader and you can see HSVE Tahoe is listed. I'm going to press enter. If you don't press enter, it will automatically go into the OS itself. However, it is probably best off to press enter. So I'll let macOS Tahoe load and then we'll go through the initial setup process, and I'll also show you how you can generate a generic EFI for your system and get yourself up and running. So let me wait for macOS to boot up. So if you've done everything correctly, this is the screen you should see. Obviously we're going to set this up similar to a real Mac, so we're going to select our language, etc. So I'm in the UK, and essentially we're going to set it up as a real Mac but skipping the Apple ID parts. Now this is very important as we'll do these later. I'm going to set up as new, choose whatever you'd like for that. All we're going to do is skip the Apple ID parts, skip the data collection, stuff like that, accept the terms and conditions if you've read them properly, and then we'll be on the desktop. Now I will mention, if you've got I think it's Navi 24 or Navi 23 card, so basically a 6700 XT, 6900 XT, stuff like that, you may not be able to pass through the GPU straight away, just because our custom EFIs apply a fix for these GPUs. So what you might have to do is run it with Proxmox's inbuilt GPU for the minute until we get to the EFI stage. You can obviously skip to that section with the timestamps on YouTube below. Now, once we're on the desktop and we've copied the EFI over, then you can begin to pass through your GPU, which will just be the same sort of scenario as what we've just done with my RX 570. So, great news. So we're on the desktop. So I'm just going to select quit for now. All I'm going to do is just double check that the time zone's set correctly. If we go to Finder, we're looking for the HSV icon here. Now this is our main drive. If we go to the Get Started folder and go to EFIs, we have a few different zip folders. So for the 5000 and 6000 series GPUs, you're going to use this folder. If you've got a native GPU, which is obviously one of the native ones that Apple supports, so obviously for whatever reason the RX 570 is in one of the Macs somewhere in the world. And also there's one for legacy NVIDIA GPUs, but unfortunately Apple dropped support for them back in Ventura, I believe, so that won't be any use to us here. Also, if you just don't want to use macOS with a GPU, there is a no GPU EFI there for you. What I recommend is the EFI you want to use, just drag it over to the desktop, then double click and you'll get a folder within that which will obviously say native GPUs. If we open up that folder, you get an EFI folder that we're going to copy. And then now that that's in our clipboard, we're going to go back and go to Tools. Just give me a moment, because what I might try and do, obviously, just for a test, because I very rarely use this software, so I would like to see how easy it is to use, and that might be my new sort of software to use. So if we open this up, in Tahoe there's a really silly security thing that you have to do, where you have to go into settings and then privacy and open anyway, even if you do right click for some reason. So you can update if you want. I'm just going to cancel for now because it's not really one of my major things to do at the minute. If we then, I believe, go up to the edit menu, we should be able to mount the ESP or EFI file, and obviously this is our disk, the Apple Link Vertio Block Media, and just select mount. We won't open the config.plist yet because that's going to be the next step once we've got the EFI moved over. Now that that's opened, we should see something on the left hand side that's called EFI. This should be empty at the moment, but we're going to paste that EFI folder inside. So it should look like the EFI partition, and within that a folder called EFI with all of our configuration in it. If that's the case, that's brilliant. Once we're done, which again it may take a while, if we double click into the EFI and go to OC and right click and open config.plist, this is essentially a file that tells Hackintosh or the macOS VM what configuration to use. So there's a basic configuration at the minute, but you can add stuff to it, make changes, etc. But what I do recommend is using the backup and snapshot features in Proxmox that I will give you a demo on here today, just later on in the video. At the moment we're going to go to the platform info, and you can see at the minute it's set to iMac Pro 1,1. I'm going to select the Mac Pro 9,1, which is the one that I like to use. So we'll find that in the list. I believe it may be above MacBook. Essentially, you can pick whatever you want really, but I prefer using this Mac Pro 7,1. And then always make sure to generate a unique ID and a unique ROM. And then once that's done, select generate a few times again, just to make sure you don't have the same serial number as someone else, because that can cause issues on their side and yours. Once you've done that, select the save. We're going to close macOS down, obviously through the normal method. And once this is shut down, we're essentially going to remove the HSV folder. Now, if you do want any tools on there, just copy the Getting Started folder to the desktop. So you can see the VM shut down. We're going to go back to hardware. And this disk here, the ID is 0, we're going to select detach. And you can select remove. I just like keeping it at the bottom, because if for some reason the macOS VM doesn't sort of boot up correctly and you don't have a valid backup, it's always easy to reattach this image. Once we've done that, we're going to then boot up the system again and give it a test. You can see HSV Tahoe has popped up. That is a good sign. What I'll do, I'll create a snapshot of the VM. We'll create a file, and then what we'll do is delete that file and see if we can restore the snapshot of when the file was there. So we're on the desktop and we're now ready to do obviously the test. What I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to delete this, as we've already got the folder here, and then I'm going to make a new folder that says subscribe to HSV, like so. There's the folder, and essentially now if I go to Proxmox, go to snapshots, sometimes you may get this message. This means that essentially, because we're running the raw medium on our virtual machine, we won't be able to create live snapshots. If that's the case, you can do the backup method, which is what I prefer to do anyway. You can also set backup schedules, so this allows the virtual machine to be backed up automatically, so you've got peace of mind sort of that the virtual machine has a valid backup. So you can do that from hourly all the way to weekly. You know, it's very flexible. So all I'm going to do is, we've got them folders on the desktop here. All I'm going to do is create a valid backup. So if I go to backup now, let's go into my backups drive, and I'll call it before deletion. Now this will back up whilst the VM is running. Sometimes it does take quite a while to back up, and it will freeze your VM the odd time as well, just because it's a full fat backup rather than a snapshot. So the backup is now finished. You can see it's about 30 gig in size. So obviously if you're backing up quite a lot, it can use storage space. If we go back to our VM, it actually went to sleep just then, and get logged in, and then delete this folder, move to trash, and then if we shut down the machine, then if we go to backup, restore, from backup configuration, that's all fine, select restore, yes, this will then begin to restore the backup that we've just created. So you can see it says restore OK. So all I'm going to do now is start up the virtual machine. We'll get to the desktop and we'll see if that file that I deleted is still there. So let's do that now. So we're on the desktop now, and as you can see the subscribe to HSV file. So that's the one that we deleted, and you can see it's successfully restored. So that's going to be it for this video. If you do have any ideas or requests that you would like to put down in the comments below, please do. Obviously this video is probably way too long, so unfortunately I can't show anything else in this video, but if you do want to see anything else, please let me know. All the commands and stuff used in this video will be down in the description below, and I'll also leave a link to our posts page, which has very useful information about macOS etc. on it. Thanks ever so much for watching. Goodbye.